Thank you. Thank you so much for this warm introduction, and we welcome you to the presentation of our paper. And yeah, let's start right away. Our presentation will start to describe the problem. We will introduce our idea and tell you about the Empamos project, which is the fundament of our project D2 design. And then I will provide you with information about our Train the Trainer workshop, and in the end, like to discuss our ideas with you. As mentioned before, I'm not the only one who is presenting our paper today. There's with me Tobias Schmohl from the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Ostwestfalen-Lippe, which is a small region here in Germany. And I'm teaching in Switzerland, but I live in Berlin here in Germany as well. So let's start with the entire team, because we are just 2 persons of a bigger team, and D2 Design is a project bringing 8 scientists in various disciplines and backgrounds from various places in Germany together for just one goal: fostering cooperative learning based on game design elements in online education, face-to-face teaching, blended and hybrid education scenarios. In October last year, we were given the chance to research and develop a prototype for improving learning based on gamification for the National Education Platform. The platform is an initiative by German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, bringing together various projects to develop models and ideas for the future of education. We started from one common problem in our society. Since the pandemic started, our social interaction decreased, especially in learning environments. Students missed interaction with their peers, but also with their teachers. At the same time, many instructors struggled with the challenge to encourage and motivate active participation of their students, a circumstance that is still comprehensible if you do hybrid teaching as I do, or as I did last week. When the students were forced to work in breakout rooms, they just vanished from the lecture. But I'm not the only one who struggles with it, right? Many results of surveys about the impact of COVID-19 on higher education support this experience. Based on the long-time research of Professor Schmohl, we started to search for solutions in the direction of cooperative learning. Very fast, we decided that cooperative learning as a method could offer a solution for the decrease in interaction between students and educators. Cooperative learning also has a broader benefit. It ensures social exchange opportunities and unleash the untapped learning potential. Cooperation is a 21st century skill that enables human beings to deal with highly emergent systems, organizations, and situations, as Ulf Daniel Ehlers mentions it in his book Future Skills from the year 2020. According to the self-determination theory by DC and Ryan from 2014, every human being strives for relatedness. Every one of us wants to feel connected with others in a social environment. This is what motivates us, even to do boring tasks. At least you could say cooperative learning as a process of planned social interaction could be used as enhanced teaching for ongoing online education and face-to-face teaching, blended and hybrid education scenarios. Based on the long-time research of Professor Voigt, we then did a sideways look from higher education into other fields, for example, the game industry. The game industry has been very successful in creating collaborative and cooperative environments since many years, both offline and online. What we can learn from games is how motivation works. Players engage voluntarily in social interactions within game settings if these settings satisfy their motivational needs. Researchers have identified several game design components that are linked to the process, like rewarding players with badges, or if they have to pass special victory conditions and so on. These design elements are all contribute to the motivation of players in games. As every game focuses on different behaviors of the players, each game rewards also different achievements. By identifying these design principles and game elements, researchers like Katie Seaborn, Janine Kratz, or Harald von Korflesch have investigated how to transfer motivating factors from games to non-game domains, or how to connect such principles to learning. So for us, it was the next logical step to tie the game design elements to didactically solutions and educational theories. The game design elements and patterns we could recognize in games as cooperative elements show similarities with the structure of didactic scenarios. Both use concepts and definitions that can be found in terms of educational science. Identifying those terms is building bridges between games and educational science. The results can be used to design motivational environments for collaborative learning. We embedded them into a curriculum to enable educators to understand cooperation's motivational and educational basics. But let's start with game first. The project Ampamos deciphers the motivational DNA of social games since the year 2016. Following an empirical approach while using machine learned algorithms, Ampamos has described more than 100 game elements as a pattern language from a dataset of 8,300 games and about 50,000 connection descriptions on how game designers combine these elements. The database is accessible via a deck of cards and an application based on artificial intelligence. We used a two-step approach to identify the game elements that form cooperative molecules. First, we explored the pool of game elements using quantitative data analysis. Based on game elements that cover cooperation in games, we used the AI recommendations to gather elements. The limits to creating a molecule were between 5 and at least 3 game elements. After the data-driven and correlative assembly of molecules, we use the qualitative description of the elements' relations to validate and describe the molecules, resulting in a set of 18 hypotheses of cooperative molecules. As described before, the cooperative molecules are composed of individual game design elements, which repeat themselves from molecule to molecule. The elements contain terms belonging to the field of educational sciences like action or role or resource. These terms represent certain concepts, definitions, or assumptions in educational science, which play a role in didactic scenarios for cooperative learning as well. By connecting the elements with their definitions from educational science, bridges are built from games to educational theory. Automatically, the molecules ultimately comprise a practice-oriented didactic guide for designing cooperative learning environments. And I would like to hand over to Professor Schmohl talking about his research a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. So as Nina pointed out to you, we draw from those social games specific molecules that help us identify motivational clues or motivational strategies used in social games and that can be used for cooperative learning. So we started from the question of the status quo in higher education to include these individual elements and didactic results into one learning theory in a theoretical design. So as we all know, education is transforming at the moment worldwide. The future goal of education in universities is, as Nina pointed out before, to prepare students to deal with highly emergent systems, organizations, and situations. And this requires students to develop curiosity, imagination, vision, resilience, and self-confidence, as well as the ability to act in a self-organized manner, as Elos puts it. In learning environments that stick to this goal, the role of the educators shifts from, let's say, the sage on the stage that presents content and that imparts knowledge, So educators are no longer sages on the stage, but guides on the side that help students find their own ways of learning. So this description links particularly well to the situated learning paradigm. Situated learning ties into a high degree with forms of self-organized study, and especially those associated with interpersonal interaction, social exchange, cooperative forms of problem solving, problem-based learning, and so on, as shown in various previous research results. All participants share their knowledge voluntarily. That's important. This reminds us of the voluntary and self-organized activities in social games. We developed a curriculum to enable educators to implement motivational molecules from game design to collaborative learning opportunities based on these results. The results or the development of an appropriate curriculum followed two basic ideas or two fundamental ideas. First, to change the perspective on learning opportunities by examining them as broken games. So we looked for misfits and tried to take on a perspective of a broken game in an educational scenario. And second, to spark the participants' interest in the potential of cooperative molecules. We conducted an initial workshop in which we conveyed the basic concept of the card deck of 12 molecules and the corresponding game elements. After that, the participants work on their projects in meeting intervals of 2 months. And during the joint meetings, all members of this new community exchange their ideas and problems. Experienced users or more experienced users coach their peers or the whole group. So we started to accompany this process using various instruments such as surveys, focus groups, and ethnographic as well as orthoethnographic approaches. The workshop's prototypes evaluation came out very enthusiastically, actually, but this is only a snapshot, of course. So our initial goal was to guide the participants in their first attempts to use game molecules for cooperation with their respective teaching scenarios. So the goal was to make those educators use our molecules in their specific pedagogy or their educational settings. At this stage of our research, it is of course too early to tell if the molecules can support them in designing motivating cooperative learning opportunities. Another limitation of our research becomes visible when considering a possible transfer of the curriculum to a broader community of teachers. The demand for subject-specific training is usually higher than the demand for training in general pedagogical design strategies. There is also a constant need for organizational effort. The community and an appropriate technical infrastructure must be maintained to foster a formal and informal exchange of ideas and experiences. The empirical database needs to be further developed as well. At the moment, it covers only a database of 325 social games. That is, the databases for cooperative game molecules is even smaller. Our goal is to gain additional data and insights into the design process with the community's growing experience and practical results. So we draw from experience of educators on the one hand, on the data that we derive from those social games that are being analyzed at the moment, and from our accompanying research following those mixed methods designs that I just outlined a couple of minutes before. So I hope you have gained some insight into our research. Thanks for listening, and we're open for any questions that there might be.
Thank you so much. Very interesting and well-structured presentation. We open the floor for the audience, whether they are on site and online, for any questions. Well, I do have a question, actually. Given the fact that anything gets into the school structure is boring,
how would you motivate the students to engage in gaming while they are doing an activity? It's a bit challenging when it comes to students and they are trying to engage them in a subject. So how did you overcome that barrier and make them engage? Because engagement is the hardest part.
That's right. And there are, oh, sorry, I have a background noise here. Now it's better. Yeah, there are two different answers, I think, to these solutions, if I may, or would you like to answer that, Nina? No.
Both of you.
So one answer would be on the basis of social games. So for social games, if we only draw from them, the answer would be use, for example, competitive modes, or use introduce some form of competition within this scenario, and it will make it more motivating for participants. And the other answer would be in an educational setting, or in a university teaching and learning setting, that it's not that simple. So it's not possible to do just the same as we would do with a broken game in this case. And we have to address several more context factors within education, like how do the students know each other, how much competition will foster or will promote their learning, and that is actually quite a sensitive topic, because a lot of competition can motivate some, but you will buy this motivation of few by demotivating several more that perhaps were not able to achieve this first place or to gain this badge or something. So what's usually done is to introduce some form of badges or some form of certificates or so. But that's the main thing that we do differently in our approach. We don't just use gamification as an add-on for learning scenarios, but we try to evaluate and to analyze in a sound way, on an empirical basis, what is happening within this teaching scenario right here. What are the prerequisites for our intervention? And then we draw, or we can suggest from this empirical data specific motivating factors. So there is no simple answer. There is
I'm so sorry if I overwhelmed you with my question, but because, you know, we as an educator, we usually have this, I consider it the hardest moment to break the ice and start the engagement phase. It's always the hardest, but I'm sure you're gonna, you know, with more research, we're gonna see how things are gonna go with the online and gaming. But very interesting topic. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I'm sorry for my overwhelming question. I feel bad.
That's all right, yeah.
But I was like interested. I mean, because I want to use these methodologies in my classroom and see them applied in other classrooms and in different levels. But thank you so much. And now we are going to move to another interesting topic, which is practical engineering thesis under pandemic conditions, challenges and new approaches, by Lina from Aachen University of Applied Science in Germany. Lina, are you with us?
So I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you. And
perfect. So I'm going to start my video.
Thank you.
You should see me.
Yeah,
and
we see you.
Now I just have to open the presentation and then we can get started at once. So, can you see it now?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. So you still see it?
Yes, I do.
Oh, perfect. Now we can get started. So my name is Lina Schulze-Buchsloh. I'm working as a research associate at the University of Applied Sciences in Germany. I greet everyone in the round and I'm happy to be here, at least digital. And I would like to present our latest paper called Practical Engineering Thesis under Pandemic Conditions, Challenges and New Approaches. We would just like to give you some look in how we are struggling all these, let's call them new problems. So at first, we have to make us familiar with the situation of students in pandemic in general. Of course, in most cases, even in Germany, we also have lots of contact restrictions and lockdowns for now 2 years now. Let's say more or less severe, but ongoing more or less over time. Many courses in university are completely digitally instead of being on site as it's used to be. So many students have very little contact with their lecturers and fellow students. And we also found out that many students are uncertain because, at least in Germany, we have quite frequently changing rules and, for example, postponed or even cancelled exams. So this change of surrounding by politics, but also by situation of pandemic and university management is a quite, let's say, changing mixture that also makes it a little bit complicated. So what are the consequences for our students? Of course, all these changes led to several consequences for the students. Many of them complained about loneliness. Most of them are sitting at home more or less whole time. They hardly know their fellow students, especially those who began their studies during the pandemic, because they don't have the interaction at university on site from the life before pandemic. Some of them even don't know the normal everyday life at university because some of them never really got in touch with it. Some, of course, knew it from the time before the pandemic and are more or less upset because they miss it. It's more or less the same. Then we have, of course, problems by uncertainty, poor planning, and a lack of prospects. So for many students, it's quite hard to set up a plan when they will do which module, which test, which exam to get their graduation. So it's quite poor planning. Many students also have more or less severe problems of motivation and self-organization at home. We got to know. Of course, there are some students who have none of these problems or just very little problems, but especially for freshmen, for example, it was quite hard to get a good start in their studies and to motivate themselves and to organize themselves if the contact on site is more or less completely missing. Of course, we tried to give some instruction videos or do some online help desk service times to ask questions and so on, but we found out that it's not the same. And another big problem for many students are financial problems, since many part-time jobs, for example in gastronomy and so on, disappeared because of business closures and lockdowns. So we have quite a lot of students really having problems to finance their studies. So you see, you have a quite big, let's call it, package of consequences and problems the students have to struggle with. And that's not the easiest way to study, I would say. Then we would like to concentrate on a quite special situation, which is the situation of graduation. Of course, bachelor and master theses are important elements at the end of our engineering studies. The aim is that the students prove by independently working on a practical topic that they have learned all necessary tools to deal independently with typical problems in a given time frame and with some support from a supervisor. Usually this is a professor or also the academic scientific staff.
Can you hear me, Lena? Because we are not following with the slides.
She has to share the screen and not the PPT.
Okay, so you need to share the screen, not the PowerPoint itself, because we can't follow up with you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought it was already done. I will check it. Just a moment, please. Can you see it again? Do you see it again now?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Then probably we had some little problems on the internet
That's
connection.
fine.
I'm sorry.
But your explanation was, we followed up with your explanation. You may continue. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks for interrupting me because I of course see it. So let's just continue. We are in special situation of graduation. Now you can also read it. As I already said, for most students, it's quite interesting and also important because they should prove that they have learned all necessary tools to deal with typical engineering problems. At least in our courses, it is that the final thesis also accounts a quite large proportion of the overall final grade. So of course, it's important for the students to get a good mark. And often the thesis is an important topic in the first job interviews with graduates when they start their career, because usually when they come from university, they have not yet been working in, for example, other companies in industry or something like that. So if they are asked to present themselves, the question to please show their final thesis is quite usual, let's say. So of course, many students try to get the best thesis they can get. So I now hope you get the next slide as well. We have the big problem that during these pandemic times, many students ask themselves whether it makes more sense to complete the studies somehow and struggle with an uncertain job market with application problems, or whether they should try to study longer and hope for better times after the pandemic. In March 2020, of course, we had some people who just said, well, I will take some time and just hope to get pandemic ended. Now, after 2 years, this hope is more or less dying. So we have lots of students who just have to find a way through this problem. Of course, the students suffer because they have this problem of, let's call it disorientation. And even in university, it's quite hard to give advice what to do, because no one really exactly knows how to proceed. So it's this, let's call it waiting imbalance, and no one really knows what is going to be in a few months of next year. In engineering studies, as we do, and in the engineering courses, we usually have two big options for graduation. The first option is a graduation at university. So this means that the university gives the thesis topic. Usually it's from ongoing research or development projects, and it's taking part of these projects. At the moment, in this pandemic situation, we have the problem at university that, of course, for example, the procurement of literature is made much more difficult, because sometimes we have partially closed libraries and we do not have the access. Also, the access to laboratories, workshops, test stands, or similar stuff at the university is severely restricted. So it's quite hard to get measurement time, for example, or to plan some experiments. Many students have quite great difficulties to even find a suitable topic for a thesis, because many research projects are delayed because of scientific staff working at home, and not carried out experiments because no one is on site. Also, some of the big project partners who give the money for this type of research and development projects are delayed. So it's quite hard to plan, and some interesting questions who are suitable for a thesis topic simply can't get started. Now let's switch to the other option, to do graduation in industry. That means your thesis topic is coming from industry, and the university is just more or less accompanying all that stuff. In former times, it was quite easy because you had lots of industry who was interested to get young people, to get them to know and to give them a good start into working by a thesis. At the moment, it's the problem that thesis and industry are hardly supervised or even not offered at all due to the home office activities of the employees. At least in Germany, we also have many companies struggling financial bottlenecks because of short-time work, depending on the type of company. And of course, this poor ability to plan due to the pandemic plays an important role as well, since many companies find it extremely difficult to agree to supervise a thesis for a period of several months without knowing how they are going to work within these months. So that also is a problem many students reported us. Then we just sat down and made up our mind in our group what we could do for those students. And in the end, we came to the conclusion, of course, we can't change pandemic and the situation at all, but what we can do is making the best of it. So what does it mean? Since it can't be foreseen when normal operation at the universities will be possible again in the long term and in a more or less, let's call it, predictable manner, we had to find new concepts. In the end, we decided to stick to our general concept that students are given real questions as a topic or parts of real questions for a thesis, for example, from ongoing research or development projects. Industrial projects were also supported as far as possible under the changed conditions by our university. And of course, we also tried to encourage the companies we have already been working with together to provide topics despite these uncertain times. So, what is most important? Of course, you have to stay in contact. In this case, it had to be more or less completed digitally. So we decided to give each individual student a regular digital meeting appointment with a supervising professor and the scientific staff or the industrial partner working on his topic, so that questions can be directly asked, answered, and discussed. So at least you have a certain professional exchange, and also to create a certain commitment when the students have to present the progress briefly every week. Most students reported that it helped them a lot to organize themselves if they were still fixed appointment in this digital sphere despite the lockdown. You have to imagine most students who are in the site to be working on their thesis don't have lectures anymore. So they have nearly no appointments and also no structure in their more or less daily life. So this is what we said we have to struggle with to find an option to keep this more or less structured. Next problem was we have to find a way how students are able to work on this thesis completely from home in these lockdown spheres. So in the case of planning and conceptioning topics, this is not a big problem as long as you have the technical equipment, like a good PC, the needed software, access to internet, maybe some books, etc. But that was quite easy to solve. Other practical questions, of course, had to be modified in such a way that they could be worked on from home as far as possible. I will show you some examples in the next slide. And if that also was not possible, we tried to analyze some of these projects not on site, but by using appropriate simulations, which also can lead to quite interesting questions for engineering students. I would now like to present some examples of theses from our, now we have to say former students because they are already finished now. And just will give you some examples what we did and what we modified to make them being able to work on their thesis even under these, let's call it was some special situations, and what we also learned from it for further students. First topic I would like to present was called Strategies and Measures to Strengthen the Interregional Construction Industry. Interregional means the region of Western Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. We are in Aachen, which is quite close to the border, so we have been interested in these interregional area. And even this thesis, which was planned to have lots of interviews with industrial partners, do some research, ask some questions to get the information, and then do an analysis of this information, was be able to be carried out completely digitally, just with very little additional effort. Of course, the request of the industrial partners was made by email or by telephone instead of meeting them or inviting them to university. Since the interviews that were actually planned on-site could not be carried out, and arranging appointments with employees in home office was also quite a bit difficult, we developed a questionnaire so that all industrial partners we surveyed were able to respond at any time when it suited them online. Of course, we had some options to be contacted if there are further questions, for example, but in the end, we just sent everything via email and just made sure that the people know what we would like to ask and what is the aim of the study by telephone. Here you can see a screenshot on our questionnaire. We had it in German language, French, and Netherlands, so that each company was able to answer in their own language. Of course, here you can see, here's the map with Germany, here are the Netherlands, here is Belgium, and this green or mint area is what we have been interested in. And for example, here's one of the interesting stuff what we found out by asking more than 80 companies what problems they are struggling by doing interregional projects and which type of help they could need further on. So this was a quite interesting study we completely managed digitally by our former student Felix Brunner. And it was very interesting that even if it was a bit strange for all participants, we got very interesting results and quite good ideas what we can now do to help these industry to get into better contact over the border. So this was one example how it could, even work completely without meeting anyone and without leaving home. The next example is another thesis for bachelor, was called New Automation for Smart Sea and Sweetwater Aquariums. Our first aim was to develop this type of automation, of course, on-site at university, so that you have your aquarium at home and have some kind of survey system that keeps all values under control while you are not at home, for example, for holidays or something like that. Since laboratories and the workshops were not available because of lockdowns, we tried to find a solution how the student also could work on his topic. And he just borrowed all the needed parts he needs to construct all the stuff and took them home. So he was able to work on his project at home. And for example, programming a microcontroller like Arduino, which was used in this case, could be done from home without any big problems as well. So here, for example, you see a flowchart of regulation where he just made up his mind which type of regulation he needs. Then he just made up his mind which parts I need. Here you see one of these Arduinos and a wiring diagram. So we get a list what we needed. Then we just ordered all the stuff from internet, gave it to the student, and in the end, you can see here, he found out how to build everything together at home and created these apps which give the customer all values about his aquarium while he is not there. Also, another interesting example.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're running out of time. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
If you could wrap up, because I need to end the session.
So I just will show you one last picture. That was my last example. And then, of course, we try it out. And then I give time to the next one. This is quite interesting stuff. This was completely constructed at home in assembly parts. And then we just assembled all parts. So it had to be transportable, of course, to university for one single day with one single person to do the measurement. So it was also another option to say, okay, we just put everything in small parts at home, assemble in one day and do the measurement. That was another example how it could work on. So then I just end my presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Then, of course, I'm interested into the next speech.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this interesting, especially the lockdown really affected us globally. And I'll open the floor for everyone to speak up and have questions. Do you have any questions, whether you are on site or online? Please raise your hand. I do have a question for you, Lina. In terms of assessment, which is, the most, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So in terms of the assessment, how were you able to assess the students? I mean, working, project-based, and all of these things are really, good, and we've done these strategies. But when it comes to assessment, we've noticed some educational loss. I don't know about your case. Were you be able to assess the students?
I would say in most cases, yes. Of course, some single ones where it's hard to do. Let me say this way, we have two big groups of students. We have one group of students which is easy to manage, let's say it, all in all, because they have the idea, even if the times are special, we try to make the best out of it. So they want to do it and they want to show what they have learned. And then you have also quite good options to find concepts to get them to their graduation. We have been struggling lots of problems with those students who, let's say, more or less disappeared in the digital world, and who don't ask questions, who don't come to digital lectures. They are more or less probably lost, I guess. And of course, it's quite hard to contact them, even if you don't know them all individually, of course.
Yeah.
So assessment also, of course, is a problem, but for those who really try, still to make the best of it, we, up to now at least, we always found a way to get it through. But for those who, somehow are wherever, somehow in the orbit, of course, it's very hard for us as well. So there is a loss, definitely, but I think it also depends on the student and on the student's personality, how big this type of loss, let's say, is. But of course, this is something we just can change, in smaller steps.
Yeah, true.
Some, of course, we reach quite easily, and some we don't.
Yes.
This is at least our personal...
It applies everywhere, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lina. It was very interesting.
No problem.
Topic. Thanks. And now we move with the last but not least, our guide. Isabella, how are you? Good to see you. And we're going to talk about the future perspective in European cooperation for the promotion of science education.
Yes, sure. Yes,
And
just a second. No, here, just a second.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Vuoi a tutto schermo?
Sì, sì, grazie.
Va bene. Aspetta, sì, va bene. Metto si vede solo lo speaker. Aspetta. Va bene, metto per me.
Lo so, tutto scherzo.
Grazie.
Likewise. So hello, I will try to be as brief as possible because I'm the last speaker and I don't want to take your time as lunch is almost ready. My presentation will focus on the funding opportunities that are available at European level in the field of science education. Because besides being involved in and organizing international conferences at Pixel, what we do is we support especially universities, but also other public authorities such as ministries or hospitals who are interested in accessing to European funds in the field of higher education, and in this case, more specifically in the field of science education. So this is the summary of my presentation. I will present the Erasmus Plus program and then very, very briefly the Horizon program. Okay. Okay, yes. So starting with Erasmus Plus, this is the European program in the field of education, and it has three strategic priorities. The first one is social inclusion, the second one is digital innovation, and the third one is the promotion of sustainability and a green economy. So very general priorities. Who can participate? All organizations working in the field of education, starting from universities. And by university, I don't only mean higher education institutions, but also, for example, associations of lecturers, association of higher education institutions, etc. And the same is for schools. So school teachers associations, parents organizations, etc. The countries, basically the entire world can be involved in this program. There are two types of countries as far as the Erasmus program is concerned. The first group is the so-called program countries and the partner countries that are that can be involved in the program and can receive funds in the framework of the program. The budget in the period 2021-2027, the budget of Erasmus Plus is 26 billion euro. As you can see, the biggest share of the budget is for the higher education sector. The program, it's an umbrella program. It's very big. It's organized in 3 key actions and the so-called Jean Monnet action. We're going to very briefly go through only 2. We are going to briefly analyze 2 of these actions. So the first one is mobility. It is possible. This is the old Erasmus program. Myself, I have been an Erasmus student many years ago. So the program is to provide mobility opportunities for students, but also for teachers, researchers, and university staff. So this is the purpose of the program. So all type of actors involved in education can participate in these mobility opportunities. So it is possible to have for staff, for example, job shadowing activities, or it is possible for people working in universities to attend a course in another country or have a teaching assignment in another country. And the duration may be, as you can see, between 2 days up to 365 days a year. For mobility, there are 3 types of actors. The first one is the sending organization who will benefit from the grant and will organize all the mobility activities. And then the receiving organization. For example, if you are a professor and you a university lecturer or a researcher and you would like to go to another country and attend a training course on a specific subject that may be interesting for you, you can receive a grant and you can go to the so-called receiving organization. And then there are the intermediary organizations that are there to facilitate the administrative procedures related to mobility. The budget. For the beneficiary higher education institution, for example, who will receive the grant, they have 400 euro to support the organization of the mobility initiative. For the students, the budget will be 70 euro per day, and for staff, lecturers, researchers, administrative staff, etc., scholars, up to 180 euro per day. Why up to? Because it depends on the country of destination. There are countries where the cost of living is lower, and then the budget will be lower per day, and countries where the cost of living is higher, and then the budget will be higher. Similarly, the budget for travels, it will be between 180 euro up to 1,500 euro, depending on the distance where the participant will be traveling. So in a nutshell, in order to submit a request for funding in the framework of Erasmus Plus KA1, so the mobility activity, you need to have at least 2 organizations involved at transnational level, 1 sending and 1 receiving organization. The duration is maximum 26 months, and the grant request has to be submitted to the national agency. We have a Pixel in the framework of these types of projects act as a receiving organization, so people, groups can come to us to have to be trained or to have a study visit in Tuscany or to have an internship in Tuscany or in Florence. The other action I will very briefly go through is the cooperation action, KA2 cooperation among organizations and institutions, and more specifically, the so-called cooperation partnership. So there are, in the framework of the cooperation partnership, so-called horizontal priorities that are common to all fields, such as promotion of inclusion, promotion of environmental awareness, digital readiness, and common values such as civic engagement and participation. Very general priorities. And then there are the specific priorities for the different areas. So most of you are from the higher education sector, and these are the priorities of this year's call for proposal. So as you see, they are also very general. For example, stimulating innovative practice. Everything can be done within this priority. Developing STEM or STEAM, rewarding excellence, building an inclusive higher education system, supporting digital capabilities in the higher education sector. So very general priorities. The budget is up to 400 euro for the project, and the duration is up to 3 years. In a nutshell, participants minimum 3 organizations from 3 different countries, and the grant has to be, the request of grant has to be submitted to the national agency. Now, example of projects that were approved in the framework of this program. The MATI project, the applicant organization is the Instituto Politécnico de Bragança in Portugal. Pixel was acting as a supporting them in the project writing process and in the project management. The aim of this project is to find strategies so as to make it possible for first-year lecturers of mathematics in universities to assess the knowledge of the students, of first-year students, so as to adapt the program to their specific needs. A second example, the IMAP project. In this case, the aim is to promote, still we're speaking of mathematics, and to promote the use of virtual reality in the acquisition of mathematical concepts at university level. A third example, also dealing with mathematics, totally by chance, because the topics can be all kinds of topics, but these are our current projects funded by this program. This project has the aim to help secondary school teachers dealing with students' disabilities in learning mathematics, so mathematics learning disabilities. And the applicant organization here is another university, the University of Genoa, the Department of Mathematics, and they're working in this case with school teachers. Now, a couple of projects in the field of medicine. This project has the aim to promote the teaching and learning of history of medicine in the Department of Medicine in different European universities. And another project, this has just started. The applicant organization is the University of Porto, the Department of Medicine, and the aim here is to promote new strategies to deal with eating disorders and training lecturers at university level to provide future doctors with the skills to deal with eating disorders. My sixth example is Greenfin. The aim of this project here, we're speaking of the world of energy, and the aim is to promote green energy and strategies to develop and foster the further development of green energy. And the last one, this is a project having as its aim the promotion of language skills for science teachers. Very quickly. Last couple of slides on the Horizon program. This is a huge program in the field of research. It is organized in 3 pillars. And I will just focus here on the second pillar, where you can see the areas that can be dealt with. And the areas are health, culture, security, digitalization, climate, energy and mobility, food, agricultural resources, and environment. The budget is much, much bigger as compared to the Erasmus Plus program. Here we're speaking of 90 billion euro for the same period, 21-27. What do we do in the framework of this project? We help transforming good ideas into successful European projects. So if someone has an idea and you think you would like to try for a project to be submitted to the European Commission to get funds, you can talk to us and we will support you in tailoring the idea so that it can be a quality European project. And then if the project is approved, we are one of the partners and we will support the project management. So it was very quick. I hope you could more or less follow. And that's all. Thank you for the attention. If there is no questions, we can have lunch.
You know, the EU branch in Kuwait, they support a lot of collaboration, and we have good funds to collaborate with the European agencies. We can discuss this.
Yes, of course.
Yes, because I have access to them.
Yes, of course.
Yes, and this could be an ad for all GCC countries.
Absolutely.
Cooperation.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.